This is the Your Career Story podcast, and you're listening to episode 79. Is it okay to take a pay cut for better work-life balance? Welcome to Your Career Story podcast, a show that's designed for rock star professionals looking for that extra booster shot of confidence in their careers. Whether you're trying to get clarity on a job transition, want some work-life balance inspiration, or need a strategy to snag that promotion or raise, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Jena, ex-Wall Streeter turned startup junkie who now coaches hundreds of clients, empowering them to take back control of the job search and land their dream job. So sit back, grab a glass of wine, and prepare yourself for your weekly boost of career confidence. Hey there, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Your Career Story podcast. Today, we're going to be talking all about the 3 reasons to take a pay cut for better work-life balance and the 3 reasons that you should really consider not actually taking a pay cut. So I get this question a lot from people who are exploring companies that seem like, oh, wow, this company has great work-life balance, but I don't want to apply to it because they're not going to pay me enough. So before we hop into kind of our 3 reasons, I want to just set the stage and lay the foundation that just because a company has better work-life balance does not automatically mean that you will have to take a pay cut. So I think that's really important to say because I think sometimes as women, there's a lot of barriers for us even putting our hat into the ring. And we sometimes go 15 steps to the future and we think about all the problems that could potentially happen and don't actually own what's happening in the present and just put ourselves in the ring and see what happens. And I see this happening a lot with women who are like, work-life balance is so important to me, but I also want to make an X amount of dollars. And I just don't think those 2 things can happen in the same company. Let me tell you, that is not true. I really do believe that more and more companies are paying market rate and also offering work-life balance to their employees because they have to stay competitive. We'll get into this, but the employer branding market, meaning there is a whole marketing team directly in the HR department, the talent acquisition department, that is designed to help make the company more attractive to ideal customers, which are you, the employees. So there's a whole different market for that. So that being said, they do studies on this. Companies do studies on this. Institutions do study on this, on what do employees really want. So in order for these top companies to stay competitive for the top people, they need to have both. And so I just want to be clear that just because you want work-life balance doesn't mean you're automatically going to have to take a pay cut. Okay, so a couple quick announcements before we hop into those 3 reasons why you could take a pay cut, why it would be totally okay, and 3 reasons not to. Recruit the Employer opens October 21st. So it is open. We're super open next week. We're super excited to have you guys in there. So if you've been following along for a long time, you knew that we launched that course. It was highly successful in June. Super excited to have those women in there. And so if you've been feeling like you've been struggling in your job search, if you've been feeling like you do not have a community to rally around you, you want an accountability partner, you want to see, am I even doing any of this correct? We would love to see you and Recruit the Employer. So that opens next week, officially October 21st. To the public. So if you've been listening here, I would love to see you in that program to help support you in your own career transition journey. So let's talk about some concerns. Now, back to the episode. Let's talk about some concerns that you may be having when it comes to taking a pay cut. Here's some narratives that you may be playing out in your brain. You may be saying, gosh, if I take a pay cut, will it ruin my career long term? You might be saying, is work-life balance even possible? Which I think is a great pause point because I believe that we need to define for ourselves what work-life balance really looks like. We need to get crystal clear on what we deem as a successful work-life balance or successful life at home and successful work life. I think too many times people say, yeah, I want work-life balance, but don't really know what that means for them. When I was working at the New York Stock Exchange, I wasn't working till like all hours of the night and up in the early morning like I was with investment banking. But there were some things that I realized, you know what? I just don't really want to have to deal with. I didn't want to have to deal with telling somebody I was going to ask for time off and to feel really guilty about asking for time off and putting it in the system and getting it approved. I was like, I'm an adult. Why do I have to do this? And the other thing that I really didn't like is I didn't like to be attached to my BlackBerry. So those were like very specific things that in my next opportunity, I didn't want to have to deal with. And they were actually priorities for me. They were things that would improve my quality of life while living in New York City, just already crazy, already work crazed. I wanted to be able to have the opportunity to not necessarily set my own hours, but to not feel like I had somebody breathing down my neck. I didn't want to be in a super corporate environment. I wanted more of that balance and yin and yang. And I actually found them used, and both things were possible. So I was able to have what they called unlimited vacation. So you still have to, quote unquote, tell somebody you're leaving and you're not going to be at work. That's just being a kind human. But it wasn't this big, huge approval process when I worked there. And also I didn't have to be on my computer 24/7 and be responding to people maybe at 10 o'clock at night. And that to me was a really one step closer to the work-life balance freedom that I really wanted. So all that to say, you need to define for yourself, what does work-life balance actually mean for me and my family? It could look like, hey, I need to have those remote opportunities despite whether or not we're in COVID or not. Or I need to be offline by 3 p.m. so I can go pick up my kids. Or I just want to not have to be doing any work or being pinged on the weekends. Like that could be simply what you want, right? So just get really clear on what work-life balance means for you. This helps actually answer this question a lot easier. Also, another thing that I get from people is I feel guilty that I even want work-life balance. That might be a narrative you might actually believing that you didn't even realize you were thinking about. And then the other thing that often comes up when we're talking about pay cuts, we're talking about money, right? So a lot of people will come to me and they'll realize, actually, Jena, I say I want to be a part of a mission-driven organization. I do want that, but I'm realizing that my top priority is money because of XYZ reasons in my life right now. I feel embarrassed by that. I feel like that makes me a greedy person, makes me a bad person if I want to make more money. And that's a priority for me. I'm afraid to admit that. So the problem with being afraid to admit something that's true for you is that you're going to get stuck into a cycle where you're not living authentically. And we don't want that. So I want you to be okay with saying in certain seasons of your life that you want to make more money. There is no shame in that. And we'll talk through a little bit of some reasons why you might not want to take a pay cut that has no shame attached to it. So I'm not going to give you a hard answer of yes or no, whether it's totally okay 100% of the time to take a pay cut for better work-life balance, because it's completely dependent on you and your situation. It's nuanced. Depends on your values, your priorities, and your goals. So the first thing I want you to do, I want you to pull out a piece of paper. Make sure you're not doing this while you're driving. Pull out a piece of paper and write down, what does work-life balance mean to me? Ask yourself that really thoughtful question and define it for yourself so that when you're looking at companies, you can be clear and say, like, yes, I might have to take a small pay cut. Again, we don't have to always take a pay cut for that. But is it okay for me to take this pay cut because this company has all these other things that I really, really value and that are priorities for me in my life, and it's going to help me achieve better work-life balance? So this is just an important piece to start first, but let's talk about the 3 reasons that it's actually better to take a pay cut. So if you're physically unwell, so when I was in investment banking, this may seem like rather obvious, but I think it's important to say. Burnout is such a real part of our culture today. And we live in a world where success trumps health oftentimes. And I am guilty of this, right? I'm a person who can work myself to the bone. I try to work really hard, but sometimes to the detriment of my own health. When I was in investment banking, a lot of you have heard this story, but the stress that I had incurred by working so many hours physically manifested in my life. Like I was sick mentally, spiritually, emotionally, but also physically as well. And when that is happening, you realize how out of whack your priorities are. So if you're physically unwell and you're like, I need to get out of this opportunity and just find another job, and it's going to be a pay cut, but I don't care because I'm so unwell, that is an okay thing, because you can always recuperate that later on in your career. So when I was working at the New York Stock Exchange, I actually took a pay cut. I had the same salary. And when I was moving from investment banking to the New York Stock Exchange, the salary was the same, but the bonus structure was very, very, very different. And actually, because of the timing of when I left investment banking, I had to pay back my signing bonus. So I actually lost money in the process. So not only did I technically take a pay cut because my bonus was going to be a lot less than it would have been in investment banking, but I actually paid people in my investment banking firm to let me leave. But for me, that was 100% worth it, 1000% looking back on that, because I was so unwell that I wasn't doing a good job. I wasn't showing up as my best self, and I was working myself to the bone for what? To prove something to somebody that I was important. Right? Like it was my priorities were out of whack. So that's an instance when it's totally okay for you to take a pay cut. If you're feeling like gosh, I am just burnt to the core, you could totally take a pay cut. If you're making a career pivot, that's the second reason that it's okay to take a pay cut for better work-life balance. So oftentimes when we're making a work-life balance move, we also might be making a career pivot. So there is a difference in changing jobs, right? Versus making a strategic career pivot. So the problem that I see most people make is they're like, I just need to get out of my job. I hate it so much. I need to go to the next thing. I don't care how much they pay me. I just need out. That's probably your emotions talking. And while there may be some validity to that, I want you to just take a step back, see if you can, we've done other episodes on compartmentalizing how to handle, the stress of your current employer while you're looking for a future employer. But that's probably your stress talking. I want you to really think about making a strategic career move. And if you feel like you're making a strategic career move for your long-term career, you've taken the time to reflect, to understand what you want, to understand what you're going for, and you're going to make that strategic career pivot, it is totally okay for you to take a pay cut. I made that strategic career pivot from finance to sales. So I was leaving the New York Stock Exchange. I wanted to work for a startup. I knew that in order for me to actually land a job, I was going to have to be okay with taking a pay cut from finance to sales. Now, in the sales position, I knew that I had the opportunity to grow and to actually make a lot of money over the long term. So for me, it made sense because it was a strategic career move. I was learning a new skill. I didn't have a ton of experience, so it made sense that I wasn't being paid what a top-notch person might be paid, but also it had the opportunity for the future to make more money. So that's not always the case either. So sometimes you do not have to take a massive pay cut to pivot your career. Sometimes you can make a similar amount, or sometimes I've even seen people make more in their pivot, which is crazy. So I don't want you to automatically assume just because you're making a career pivot, you have to take a pay cut. But if it makes sense for your career and it's strategic, go ahead and do it. So that's the second one. And the third one is your work doesn't align with your value system. So it is okay for you to take a pay cut if you're realizing that like your work is just not in the same mindset as your value system, right? So you need to ask yourself the question similar to like, what does work-life balance mean to you? You need to ask yourself, why do I work? Now, the obvious answer is I work so that I can pay my bills, right? But we need you to go a level deeper than that. Like, why else do you work? Why else do you pick certain companies? Why else did you pick your profession? Why do you work? And so if your work that you're doing right now doesn't align with that value system and you believe that a new opportunity will, it is okay for you to take a pay cut. It's all about that strategic career move, in case you haven't picked up on that, right? It's all about being strategic and not just taking the next thing because you want to escape the thing prior. You have to, some people realize like, okay, they value money and that actually is their most important thing. And that's okay. If that's what you're chasing and that's the thing that you are going towards, you know that about yourself, right? The other thing that people maybe realize that they value instead of money might be being a part of a mission-focused business. So that's what they care most about. Some people care more about unlimited vacation or casual dress or maternity leave perks, right? Some people care about what type of team they're on. Like that's the top priority. And some people care about like the promotion opportunities with it. You have to define for yourself, what do you value? So not just what does work-life balance mean, but why do I work? What do I value? What are my top 3 non-negotiables in my next career? And by knowing that information, it's going to help you discern like, is this move, even though it's a pay cut, good for my career? We need to redefine success, I believe. I think that we look at success in a very linear way, at least in American culture, where it looks like promotion after promotion after promotion. And if that's what you want to do, I think that's great. Do it. That's the thing. However, I don't think that that's really what all people are designed to do. Some people's value system looks like, I just want to work on creative projects and I care how much I make, but I really don't need to progress. Right? Some people, progression is super important. It keeps them motivated. So you just have to decide what makes sense for you and redefine success on your own terms. So those are the 3 reasons that I believe it is okay to take a pay cut. Like if you're physically unwell, take the pay cut if it means that you're going to get out of a really toxic situation. Number 2 is if you're making a career pivot, you're making a strategic career move and you're going towards something, not just away from something. And the number 3 is your work doesn't align with your value system. So if you start asking yourself those questions about why you work and what are your non-negotiables and you realize your employer doesn't match up, it is okay if those things fall into the pay cut camp, right? that is when it's okay to take pay cut for better work-life balance. So if you needed that permission slip, you have it from me. Your fairy godmother that's talking to you through your headphones or in your car right now. Now let's talk a little bit about the 3 reasons why you shouldn't take a pay cut. I would say the number one reason is if you are aggressively paying off debt. I don't love debt. I think especially consumer debt is just can be really detrimental to your decision-making process and allows you not to be risky or actually make authentic decisions. It kind of weighs you down, right? Debt, it weighs you down. So if you have very specific financial goals in mind and those are a priority in your life right now, you should probably not take a pay cut. You should probably pay that off and then make a strategic career move afterwards if you can. I am no debt queen. I follow the Dave Ramsey methodology. So if you're not familiar with him, look him up. He has a whole methodology around how to pay off debt. And I think it's really important for us as women to pay attention to that, to pay attention to our finances and to make sure that we're making wise choices for ourselves financially. So when it comes to taking a pay cut, if you have a mountain of debt that you really are actively trying to get rid of, which I would recommend, it's going to free you up to make better choices and choices that feel more authentic to you down the road. So if that's something that you're focused on, I wouldn't take a pay cut for better work-life balance for this season. It's not for forever. You have to give yourself and let yourself know that you have a deadline and let it motivate you, right? Let it motivate you to get that debt down faster so you can leave a job where you feel like it's more in line with your value system. The second thing would be your lifestyle doesn't support a pay cut. So if you can't afford to pay your bills and keep up with your lifestyle, or you're not willing to alter your lifestyle, it's probably not okay to take a pay cut. So when I was making a massive pay cut from finance, when I was working at the New York Stock Exchange to the Muse, I took a really large pay cut. And I had to make sure I had to pull out my pen and paper and I had to make sure I was still going to be able to pay my bills and I was still going to be able to feel like I could live relatively comfy in New York while in this job. Because here's the deal. If you're like barely scraping by in your job, you're going to be stressed about not being able to pay your bills. And so you're not going to show up as a really great employee and you're really not going to show up as your best self. So it's kind of like a compounding effect negatively, right? So if your lifestyle doesn't support a pay cut or you're not willing to alter it to support that pay cut, then I wouldn't take it. There is no shame if you like nice things and you want to keep it that way, but you've got to be honest with yourself that it all goes back to your values and priorities. I think that's why it's so important to do that work and to understand what's important to you, because if you don't know the answers to that, these questions become so much harder and we like to avoid it. We like to not face it. And then we get ourselves in some trouble, right? So number one is if you're trying to aggressively pay off your debt, I wouldn't take a pay cut. Or if your lifestyle doesn't support a pay cut and you can't afford to live where you live or pay for the things that you need to pay for, and you're not willing to alter maybe the things that are not needs, but rather wants, then I wouldn't take a pay cut. And then the third thing that I would say is a great kind of just way to look at a pay cut, right? Is to see is this really going to put me into a better situation? If you are not 100% sure that it's going to put you into a better situation, then maybe you want to rethink what that's actually going to look like. So, and rethink that pay cut, right? So I see this all the time. People will interview at a company and they'll think, oh gosh, they're so amazing. Their website advertises all these health benefits, ping pong tables, free lunch. Oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And then they start working and it's the same hours, just packaged a little bit better. And so one, it goes back to define work-life balance for yourself. What does that mean? And make sure that the company, you ask really thoughtful questions in the interview process. Remember, it is not just you who's being interviewed in an interview. It is you interviewing the employer because you want to make sure it's a good fit for you and your family and your livelihood. It is okay to ask questions. You have to do due diligence on this company before you take an offer. Is it truly a better situation than what you're in right now? Is it going to help you reach your goals? When you get clarity on your goals, you get clarity on what you want, then you're able to look at things objectively and not get frantic about taking an opportunity or not taking an opportunity, right? So there are companies that, like I mentioned before, there are companies where they have whole teams dedicated to employer branding. They spend millions of dollars to make their company look attractive. You have to fight through the BS, for lack of a better phrase, ask the hard questions, and really determine if this company is going to be a better situation for you and your goals. You really have to be clear on what is important to you. What do you want? And if that company aligns with it, great, take that pay cut. But you've got to make sure that it's 100% going to put you into a better situation in the short term and in the long term. So if you need some ideas of what to ask in an interview, you can go to www.jenaviviano.com/interview-questions. So it's interview-questions. And we have 20 questions to help you figure out what you should be asking in an interview. And we've actually got amazing feedback from this. So I get people that will download this freebie and then they'll come over to my DMs on LinkedIn and they'll say, Jena, I asked some of these questions in the interview and the interviewer said it was the best question they've ever gotten in an interview. And that's really fun for me because it makes you look really great, but it also helps you get answers to questions you really care about. You just didn't know how to phrase it. It's never what you say, it's how you say it. So what I would tell you is that in conclusion, if you are questioning, is it okay to take a pay cut for better work-life balance? My answer is yes and no. It truly, truly depends on your value system, the things that are important to you, and what makes financial sense for you. So guys, this was really fun. I love this question. I get this a lot from clients. I get this a lot from people who come into my DMs on LinkedIn. And I think it's really important for us to just evaluate what's important to us so that we have a better idea of what a pay cut will really mean for our lives and for our careers. Awesome, guys. I will see you next week. Just a reminder, next week, the doors open for Recruit the Employer. I would love to see you inside if you're feeling really frustrated in your job search, you haven't made any moves, and you're looking to actually land your dream job. We'd love to give you the solution to help make that happen. All right, guys, see you next week. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for listening to Your Career Story podcast. I would love to get to meet you. And there are a couple of ways that we can connect in between episodes. First and foremost, you know I love my LinkedIn. Second is via Instagram. And third is over on my website. I actually have a special spot just for you full of fun, free resources. So all you have to do is go to www.jenaviviano.com/resources. Super simple for a bunch of freebies that will help you boost your career. Hope to see you next week.